In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Westbrook, there was one name that everyone dreaded hearing: Titan. His reputation had spread like wildfire, casting a long, dark shadow over the small, close-knit community. Titan wasn't just another dog. He was a legend in his own right. He was a massive German shepherd with a thick, muscular frame that seemed to growl even when he wasn't making a sound. His fur, a deep shade of sable, looked as though it could blend with the shadows at night, enhancing his menacing presence. His bark was loud and vicious, a low growl that rumbled from his chest and echoed in the quiet streets, sending chills down the spines of those nearby. Neighbors whispered about him in hushed tones. It wasn't just that Titan was big, it was the sheer intensity of his aggression that frightened everyone. He wasn't the kind of dog that would wag his tail or offer a friendly nudge. No, Titan was known for his unpredictable bursts of violence. His eyes, dark and unyielding, could send even the bravest person into retreat. For years, he had terrorized the streets, and it wasn't long before people began to avoid the road altogether when they saw him. The neighborhood children, who would normally be seen playing outside, stayed away from the area near Titan's house. They had heard the stories, after all, the stories of kids who had dared to approach Titan, only to be chased away by his vicious bark or, worse, his snapping teeth. Titan had been known to attack without warning, and his reputation for being a killer dog spread through the neighborhood faster than anyone could keep up with. Parents forbade their children from even getting close to the yard, and some even went so far as to warn the new residents of the danger that lurked just behind the fence. Adults, too, had their share of run-ins with Titan. A few had tried to intervene when the dog's aggression was particularly extreme, only to find themselves on the receiving end of Titan's fury. A neighbor who had once attempted to calm him with treats found himself pinned to the ground, Titan's jaws inches from his face. The man had been lucky to escape with only a few scratches, but it was enough to confirm what everyone already knew: Titan was beyond control. The dog's owners, a young couple named Sarah and Jack, had tried everything. They sought professional help, hiring dog trainers and behaviorists who claimed they could tame any dog. But with Titan, nothing worked. The more they tried, the angrier he seemed to become. No one could understand it. No one knew why Titan was this way, and worse, no one knew how to fix it. As the years passed, the young couple started to accept that their beloved dog would never be the friendly companion they had hoped for. Titan was a lost cause, a creature of fear and fury, and for everyone else in the neighborhood, Titan had become a living nightmare. Despite the growing fear around Titan, Sarah and Jack refused to give up on their dog. They loved him deeply, and they couldn't bear the thought of giving up on him. However, every attempt to tame his aggressive behavior seemed to end in disaster. The trainers they hired came from all walks of life, some with decades of experience, others with new, innovative methods. All had the same goal: to make Titan a friendly, well-behaved dog that could coexist peacefully with the neighborhood. But no matter how hard they tried, Titan's rage was untamable. The first trainer Sarah and Jack brought in was a no-nonsense dog behaviorist named Richard, who had a reputation for dealing with the most difficult cases. His method was firm and direct, requiring the dog to understand dominance and boundaries. Richard came armed with a series of techniques that he swore could break even the most stubborn animals. For weeks, he worked with Titan, using a combination of leash corrections, commands, and treats to establish control. But Titan only grew more agitated. His barking became more vicious, his growls more frequent. The more Richard tried to assert his authority, the more Titan resisted. After a month, Richard admitted defeat, telling Sarah and Jack that Titan had deep-rooted issues that couldn't be fixed with basic training. Feeling discouraged but not defeated, the couple moved on to another trainer, a softer woman named Lisa who believed in positive reinforcement. She encouraged Sarah and Jack to offer Titan treats and affection whenever he showed even the smallest sign of calmness. She believed Titan's aggression was a result of fear, and that by rewarding positive behavior, he would gradually learn to associate humans with kindness instead of hostility. But even Lisa's gentle methods failed. Titan barely tolerated the treats and only snarled when Lisa tried to get closer to him. His behavior didn't improve. In fact, it seemed to worsen. He started growling at Lisa and snapping at the air whenever she tried to engage him. The frustration was palpable. Lisa, too, eventually admitted that she didn't think she could make Titan a safe dog. Sarah and Jack were heartbroken. Their dream of raising Titan as a loyal companion seemed like a distant memory. Their lives had become filled with constant tension and anxiety, always wondering if their dog would suddenly snap and attack. The neighborhood had become a place of constant worry. The couple had stopped inviting friends over, not wanting to risk a confrontation with Titan. Even grocery runs felt like a chore. How could they leave Titan at home knowing the chaos that might erupt in their absence? They became prisoners in their own house, carefully calculating the risk every time they stepped outside. Yet, despite the mounting evidence that Titan might never change, Sarah and Jack held on to a fragile thread of hope. They still loved him, and no matter how much they tried, they couldn't bring themselves to give up on the dog they had once envisioned as part of their family. And so, they continued to search for answers, willing to try anything, even if they knew deep down that no one had yet succeeded where so many others had failed. One warm spring day, a fresh breeze blew through the neighborhood, signaling the arrival of a new family. Sarah and Jack had heard that a couple with a young daughter had moved into the house next door, but they didn't think much of it at first. It wasn't until the next afternoon that they saw the new neighbors for the first time. Emma, a lively 7-year-old girl with bright, inquisitive eyes, was skipping down the sidewalk, her brown hair bouncing with every step. Behind her, her parents, an easygoing couple, waved politely as they unloaded boxes from their car. Emma immediately stood out. She wasn't like the other children who stayed away from Titan's yard. In fact, she seemed drawn to it. As Sarah looked out of her window, she saw Emma walking toward the fence that separated their property from Titan's. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had been vigilant about keeping her distance from Titan, and here was a young girl heading straight for the dog. "Emma, wait." Sarah called out in a panic, running outside to stop her. But it was too late. Emma had already reached the edge of the fence, her eyes wide with curiosity as she peered through the metal bars. Titan was lying on the other side, his body tensed, watching her with an intensity that made Sarah's stomach tighten. Sarah hesitated, unsure of what to do. She could see that Emma wasn't scared, not in the least. In fact, she was smiling. "Hi, doggy," Emma called out cheerfully, her voice sweet and unbothered by the fact that the dog had a reputation for being dangerous. Sarah hurried over, her voice trembling as she urged, "Emma, you need to stay away from him. He's not friendly. Titan, he's not safe." But Emma simply shook her head. "He doesn't look so scary," she said softly. "I think he just needs someone to talk to." Sarah was taken aback by Emma's response. The girl's calmness seemed out of place, almost defying all logic. How could she be so unafraid? Titan had frightened even the most hardened adults in the neighborhood. Yet here was this young child, standing with complete confidence before him. For the rest of the day, Sarah kept a watchful eye on Emma. She was both concerned and fascinated by the girl's unshakable bravery. Over the next few days, Emma continued to approach Titan's fence, greeting him with her soft voice and gentle words. The neighbors couldn't believe what they were seeing. They had all been taught to fear Titan, yet Emma seemed to possess a kind of magic, the kind that made even the most ferocious dog hesitate. One morning, as Sarah watched from her porch, she saw something that took her breath away. Titan, usually aggressive and unpredictable, was lying quietly by the fence as Emma sat on the ground just beyond it. The dog's gaze was fixed on her, but there was no snarling, no growling. He simply watched her, his ears twitching every so often as she spoke to him in a voice full of wonder and warmth. It was the first time in years that Sarah had seen Titan so still, so calm. Could it be? Was there something more to this than she could see? Sarah couldn't help but wonder. Could Emma be the key to unlocking the truth behind Titan's aggression? Could this young girl, who wasn't afraid to look beyond the surface, be the one to finally reach the heart of the dog that everyone had given up on? Days turned into weeks, and Emma's visits to Titan continued without hesitation. Each day, she would walk up to the fence, her steps light and unburdened by the fear that had once dominated the neighborhood. Sarah, though still apprehensive, found herself drawn to watch these encounters. Emma's voice, soft and steady, seemed to fill the air around Titan, creating an atmosphere of calm where there once had only been tension. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Titan began to change. One afternoon, Emma arrived with a small bag of dog treats in hand, her usual smile spreading across her face as she approached the fence. Titan was resting in his usual spot, but his ears twitched when he saw her. His usual stance, tense and ready to spring, was replaced by a cautious curiosity. Emma knelt down, her eyes locked on Titan's. "I brought you something," she whispered, holding the treat up to the bars of the fence. Titan's eyes narrowed slightly, his focus unwavering, but he didn't move. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The wind carried the scent of the treat, and Titan's nose twitched in response. But he didn't lunge, didn't growl. Instead, there was an odd stillness in the air. Emma's gaze never wavered, her voice low and gentle. "It's okay," she said, as if speaking to an old friend. "I'm not going to hurt you. You just need to trust me." The treat sat in the air between them, but Titan still hesitated. His mouth was open slightly, his breath steady, but he wasn't sure. This was new. He had never been offered kindness like this before. The air seemed charged with a strange energy, a quiet tension that could have easily turned into aggression, but instead, it remained calm. Sarah, standing from her window, held her breath. She couldn't believe what she was witnessing. Then, as though the years of hostility and fear had suddenly melted away, Titan's head dipped forward. Slowly, he moved closer to the fence, his gaze never leaving Emma's. His massive paw stretched forward, brushing against the ground with surprising gentleness. Emma's smile widened as Titan's snout met the treat she held out to him. His cold nose nuzzled her hand, and for the first time, there was no growl, no bark, just a quiet acceptance. Sarah, who had been watching with bated breath, felt a wave of relief wash over her. She couldn't believe it. Titan, the dog who had once struck fear into the hearts of everyone around him, had just taken a treat from Emma's hand without showing any signs of aggression. The shift in his behavior was subtle, but it was undeniable. Titan wasn't just some dangerous beast anymore, there was something more to him. He wasn't completely healed, not yet, but in that small moment, it felt like a breakthrough. Emma stood up slowly, giving Titan one last reassuring look before turning to head back toward her house. Titan remained at the fence, watching her leave, his head cocked as if he were trying to understand what had just happened. The neighborhood had been transformed in the span of a few minutes. Emma had done what no one else had managed to do. She had bridged the gap between Titan and the world. As Sarah watched her daughter walk back to their house, she couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, Emma had the key to unlocking the fearsome dog's heart. Was it possible that Titan could be saved? Could Emma be the one to bring him peace where no one else had succeeded? As the days passed, Emma's bond with Titan deepened. Every morning, without fail, she would walk to the fence and greet the dog with a calm voice and a small treat in hand. Slowly but surely, Titan's behavior began to change. He no longer growled or barked when Emma appeared. Instead, he would simply watch her from the other side of the fence, his eyes softening ever so slightly. It was as though he was beginning to trust her, to believe that she wasn't like everyone else who had tried and failed to control him. But no one, not even Emma, could predict what would happen next. One afternoon, Sarah was standing in the kitchen when she heard the unmistakable sound of barking outside. She rushed to the window, and her heart skipped a beat as she saw Titan standing near the fence, his fur bristling and his mouth open in a snarl. And there, standing just inches from him, was Emma. She hadn't noticed that Titan had shifted into his more aggressive stance. The tension was palpable, and Sarah's stomach turned. Titan's behavior had always been unpredictable, and despite the progress he had made with Emma, Sarah feared the worst. "Emma!" Sarah shouted, panic rising in her voice. "Get away from the fence, now." But it was too late. In the blink of an eye, Titan lunged. His powerful muscles propelled him forward with such speed that Emma barely had time to react. His teeth flashed, and for a moment, everything seemed to move in slow motion. The world stood still as Titan barreled toward the fence, his jaws snapping just inches from Emma. But then, to everyone's astonishment, Emma didn't run. She didn't scream or cower in fear. Instead, she froze. Her eyes met Titan's with a steady calmness, her body completely still. Her hand remained extended, holding the same small treat she had offered him countless times before. "It's okay, Titan," Emma whispered, her voice soft but unwavering. "You don't have to be scared." Titan stopped mid-lunge, his body trembling as he came to a sudden halt. His wild eyes locked onto Emma's, and for the briefest moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Sarah stood in the window, her hand pressed against the glass, her heart racing as she watched the scene unfold. The growl that had rumbled in Titan's throat softened. His mouth, which had been open in a threatening snarl, slowly closed. Titan took a step back, his body language shifting from aggression to confusion. Emma didn't move. She remained calm, her hand still extended with the treat, and her voice continued in a soothing, gentle tone. "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered. "You can trust me." For a long, agonizing moment, it seemed as though Titan might attack. But then, something incredible happened. Titan's posture changed. His hackles began to lower, his body relaxing as though he was no longer in the grip of panic. Slowly, he stepped forward, his nose sniffing the air. It wasn't the aggressive lunge everyone had feared. It was a tentative approach. With the smallest of movements, Titan nudged his nose against Emma's hand, accepting the treat she held. The crowd of onlookers, Sarah and the other neighbors who had gathered to watch, exhaled in unison, a collective sigh of disbelief. Emma had done the impossible. Titan, the dog that everyone had feared, the dog that had terrorized the entire neighborhood, had just been calmed by a little girl. And in that one breathtaking moment, Titan took his first step toward redemption. The dangerous moment had passed, and instead of terror, there was only a tentative trust, a trust that Emma had built, one small step at a time. In the days that followed, the change in Titan was undeniable. The transformation wasn't sudden or dramatic, but it was real. The once feared dog who had ruled the neighborhood with his violent temper now began to display moments of calm. Emma's visits became a daily ritual, each one another piece in the puzzle of his healing. The fence no longer separated them in the same way it once had. Titan no longer saw it as a boundary to protect his territory, but as a simple divider between two friends. Emma never pushed Titan. She always approached him with the same patience and calmness, never rushing the process. She would sit on the ground beside the fence, speaking softly to him, reading stories aloud, or even singing gentle songs. It became a kind of routine for her, and in the process, she built a steady trust with the dog. Emma's faith in Titan never wavered, even when the dog's moods seemed to fluctuate. If there was ever a time when Titan's growls returned, Emma would simply wait, her voice soft, her hand steady, offering him a space to breathe and recenter. But the biggest breakthrough came on a warm afternoon when Emma, with her usual calm demeanor, decided to step closer to the fence. She had been sitting for a while, Titan just a few feet away, both of them immersed in their quiet connection. Without warning, Emma rose to her feet and, with careful steps, walked toward the gate that separated them. She didn't hesitate, didn't question the decision. She simply trusted her instincts. Titan's eyes followed her, and there was a long moment of tension where Sarah, watching from the window, thought her heart might stop. Emma paused in front of the gate, looking at Titan. She didn't try to rush him, didn't make any sudden movements. She only waited. For what felt like an eternity, Titan stood still, his head tilted as though contemplating the situation. Sarah could hardly breathe, unsure whether to intervene or let the moment unfold on its own. Then, as if in response to Emma's unwavering patience, Titan took a slow step toward the gate. His nose twitched, his tail flicked once, twice. He was hesitant but curious. He sniffed the air, the scent of Emma's presence now mixing with the warm breeze. Another step, then another. Finally, Titan was standing just inches from the gate, his large body towering over Emma, yet there was no tension, no aggression, There was only the quiet curiosity of an animal seeking connection. With a steady breath, Emma reached out and gently touched the gate's latch. Titan watched her closely, his gaze softening as he stood quietly by her side. Emma looked up at him and smiled, her heart beating fast but her voice calm. "It's okay, Titan," she whispered again. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help you." As if he understood her words, Titan leaned his head against the gate. The gesture was almost tender, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they were building. Emma slowly, carefully opened the gate. The world outside, the fear, the doubts, the years of isolation, seemed to fade away in that simple act. There was no violent lunge, no angry bark. There was only Titan standing at the threshold, waiting for the next step. Sarah's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and amazement. For the first time in years, it seemed as though Titan was no longer just a dangerous dog. He was a living being who had been given the chance to heal. And it was Emma, this brave little girl, who had given him that chance. The neighborhood began to change too. No longer was Titan the dog people feared. Now he was the dog people marveled at. Emma's quiet strength had transformed him, and in turn, the community began to see Titan not as a menace, but as a symbol of redemption. As Emma's bond with Titan deepened, so too did the belief that even the most lost souls could be found, if only someone had the courage to reach out. The applause echoed in Emma's ears, filling the arena with a warmth that she had never felt before. She stood there, her hands trembling slightly, still holding Max's leash as the crowd continued to cheer. Max, ever so steady, stood by her side, his calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the buzz of excitement around them. The judges, who had been silently scribbling notes for what felt like an eternity, finally stood up. The room fell quiet again, and all eyes turned toward them. One of the judges, an older woman with silver hair and glasses, perched on the tip of her nose, stepped forward. Her expression was serious, but there was something warm in her gaze. She took a moment to look at Emma and Max, then spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've seen many incredible performances today," she began, her voice calm and measured. "But there was one performance that, without a doubt, has touched all of us in a way that words can't quite express." She paused, letting the tension build in the room. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anything. She didn't need a ribbon or a trophy, but a small part of her, just a tiny part, wondered if this could be the moment when the world would finally understand, when they would finally see her and Max for what they truly were, a team. The judge's eyes landed on Emma. "Emma and Max," she said, her voice now filled with emotion, "you have shown us the true meaning of partnership, trust, and dedication. This wasn't just about a routine. It was about love. And that's why we are proud to award you the Heart of the Show ribbon." The words hit Emma like a wave. Her chest tightened, and she blinked hard to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. The crowd erupted into applause again, but this time, Emma barely heard it. The world seemed to slow down, and all she could focus on was the ribbon that the judge was holding up. The Heart of the Show ribbon was unlike the shiny gold trophies that adorned the winners' tables. It wasn't about the best tricks or the most polished routines. It was about something deeper. It was about the connection that Emma and Max shared, a connection that no amount of preparation or rehearsals could mimic. It was a recognition of their bond, the bond that had carried them through everything. As the judge walked over and draped the ribbon around Emma's neck, she felt a rush of emotion. She hadn't won first place. She hadn't won the traditional accolades of the competition. But in this moment, with Max by her side, she had won something far more valuable, the acknowledgement of what truly mattered. Max nudged her hand with his nose, and she smiled through her tears. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about showing the world that love and loyalty, shared between a little girl and her dog, were worth more than any ribbon or title. The day Titan passed the test in the park, everything changed. It wasn't just the dog's behavior that had shifted. It was the entire community's perception of him. The neighborhood that had once avoided Titan, crossing the street when they saw him, now viewed him with a sense of awe and respect. People whispered about Emma's incredible bond with the dog, and slowly they began to approach Titan, curious but cautious. They watched him, not as a terrifying force to be feared, but as a symbol of change, of possibility. For Sarah, it was a new beginning. She had spent years living in fear, trying to protect her daughter from the unpredictable Titan, uncertain whether the dog could ever truly be tamed. But now she was beginning to believe in the impossible. Emma had proven that even the most broken spirits could heal, that trust could be rebuilt, and that love, even in its simplest form, had the power to transform. One warm afternoon, Sarah decided it was time to take the next step. Titan had been making great progress, and it was time for him to experience the world beyond the fence for the first time in years. Sarah, Emma, and Titan stood at the gate to the yard. It was as though everything had led to this moment. The gate, which had once been a barrier, now stood open. Titan was ready to step out into the world. With Emma at his side, holding his leash, Sarah opened the gate and led Titan out onto the street. They walked together, Emma guiding Titan with her steady presence. The sun bathed the streets in warmth, and the sounds of the neighborhood, the laughter of children, the chirping of birds, filled the air. For the first time, Titan wasn't cowering in fear. He wasn't running in panic. He was walking calmly by Emma's side. As they walked through the neighborhood, Sarah couldn't help but smile. She saw the same neighbors who had once kept their distance, now pausing to smile at Titan and Emma. Some even came forward, offering a kind word, and a few brave souls even petted Titan, who responded with a gentle nudge of his head. It was as though the fear that had clouded their perception of him had finally lifted. Titan had not only earned his place in the neighborhood, but had also earned their trust. The journey, though far from over, felt complete. There would still be moments where Titan's past would haunt him, where he would need the quiet strength Emma had shown him so many times. But Sarah knew that Titan was no longer a danger to the community. He was no longer the menacing dog that had struck fear into everyone's hearts. He had become a testament to the power of patience, love, and compassion. As they made their way back home, Sarah watched as Emma and Titan walked ahead, side by side. She could see the bond between them, the trust that had been built step by step, day by day. Titan had become more than just a dog. He had become part of their family, part of their community. That evening, as Sarah tucked Emma into bed, she looked at her daughter and smiled. "You did something incredible," she said softly. "You saved Titan." Emma smiled back, her eyes bright. "I didn't save him, Mom," she replied quietly. "I just helped him find his way. We both did." And in that moment, Sarah realized that Emma was right. The journey wasn't just about saving Titan, it was about showing him the way forward. It was about trust, and it was about love. As the night settled in, Sarah sat by the window, gazing out at the yard where Titan now lay, peacefully resting. For the first time in a long time, the world felt right, and she knew, deep in her heart, that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, for Titan, for Emma, and for their family.